the biggest thing that helps with retention is making content in a way that it's like, okay, I need to listen to more of this. Like they need to leave the episode. Okay, I'm better off after listening to this podcast, and I like that feeling, and I want to come back.
This Audience Summit is brought to you in partnership with Podcast Notes, the best ideas from the world's best podcasts in minutes.
Nathan, thank you for coming on our summit. We're really excited to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, your show, when and why you started it, and what the mission is for your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the podcast in the beginning of the year, and it's called the New Money Podcast. A little bit about me, I guess. I just graduated. I'm, new grad in the working world, trying to figure it out. And to kind of talk on why I started it was, as I was going through that process, I felt that a lot of people around my age, money wasn't a very prevalent topic, and it was taboo. And as you guys probably know as well, it's probably not that much different. You don't really chat about money too much. It's kind of rude almost. And I started to notice that almost an ignorance around money was socially acceptable, and it was almost like encouraged. Like you'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm so broke," and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so broke too." And it was sort of like this relatable thing. And it's like, damn, like really, like I'm not like, not that I had any money because I was broke too, but like I was like, why are we celebrating this? And I started to really get involved with personal finance a few years ago, and those conversations, I don't know if they got louder or my ears got better, but I started to hear it more. And I'd done a podcast with a friend of mine, a few buddies of mine, sports one, and that fizzled out. And I realized, okay, well, here's this like kind of like question. I'm like, why are we not talking about this more? I absolutely in love with it. And, I'd done a podcast before. I was like, why don't I just start chatting about it? And essentially the mission is to just start that conversation, just push, young adults in that direction. It's not, I'm not coming here making a promise of $1 million by the age of 30. I'm not, trying to deliver. I'm just trying to kind of gently push you in a more financially aware sort of sense. And that's pretty much the whole podcast is just different topics to inform you and gently sort of nudge you in the right direction.
Well, that's great. I love that mission. I've listened to a couple of episodes in prep for this podcast summit, whatever we're titling it as. I really enjoyed, some of the topics you go after, like how to get a perfect credit score, or, should we be villainizing billionaires, or are they actually doing benefits to society? And I think some of those conversations are really important to be having. And I completely agree with the mission. It's something Kyle and I frequently talk about on our show, is that, it's not cool to have the passive ironic attitude about self-deprecating, about not being good at things that are important to be good at. And so I love that you're finding a passion of yours and some knowledge you have and some skills you have on podcasting to help address that. So the first question I have for you for the summit that we've been asking all of our participants, what has been the most effective marketing channel for growing your audience, and how have you used it?
Instagram would definitely be the number one channel. When I first started, I realized that podcasting isn't great for organic growth. Like it's really, really hard to just use your podcast to market yourself. So you have to go to social media. You have to go to different platforms and try to market it. I was familiar with Instagram, but I'm really familiar with, Facebook ads and things like that. But there's something about Instagram that I wanted to sort of leverage. And I'm glad I did, because it's one of the best platforms, in my opinion, where you can go on, you can search up a hashtag in your niche, and you can just find people, and you can just do that sort of consistent outreach. So that's what I did. I started the page. I kind of floundered around a little bit, post here, post there. And then I realized, okay, like I got to sort of take this thing seriously. So I started to educate myself on, like I said, like hashtag research and consistent posting and what works, and the algorithm. How does that work? At least what do people think it works? Because Instagram's not really telling us how it works. We kind of have to piece it together ourselves. Going through that sort of process and starting to really engage within my niche, which is personal finance, really, really helped grow the podcast. And so I connected with a lot of people that are in the same sort of niche or interest. And I really did a lot of outreach, like a lot of engagement to other platforms. And then, reciprocity comes in, people start to, look at your stuff, and it kind of is sort of symbiotic in that sense. So that was number one. And now I'm starting to really do the TikTok thing and the Reels thing, and I'm trying to play around with that. But, I feel pretty good about it. And I think if, anybody wanted to get started, Instagram's very straightforward. You could just start an Instagram, start posting, and figure it out from there.
I think that's cool that you are kind of approaching even the social media strategy in the same way as the actual content of your podcast, because in the episode I was listening to, you talk about, one of the listener questions was, how do I grow on Instagram? And that's the exact strategies you shared with them are go find hashtags related to your niche and things you're trying to grow and contribute real value over time. And eventually reciprocity will kick in. But Kyle, you want to queue up question number 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question for you is, what are some underrated tactics that you've used to attract listeners to your show?
I think, I don't know if you could consider it underrated, but really bringing on guests that have a sizable audience is probably one of the best things you can do. You can, bring on people that are a lot bigger than you if you can land them. If same sort of size if you can, even smaller, just to produce an episode and put an episode out. I think having somebody on their show, they promote it on their sort of platforms is a great way. I think, having, I don't do it the past few episodes, but I usually do like a listener questions, and having that sort of Q&A on your social media to build that engagement really helps drive people to the show, because it's like, oh, will my question get read this week? Like, what's going on? And it really, it's not crazy. Like, you're not going to get crazy numbers from something like that because only so many people ask questions. But, it is a definite tactic where you have people come in because they want to know, is my question going to get answered on the show? So I'd say those are probably the two. And then, yeah, that's the two that come to mind right now.
Oh, those are great. Appreciate you sharing those. Third question here. How have you converted listeners into fans? So in what ways have you kept the same people who are already listening coming back?
I think every single episode I'm trying to deliver a point home or several points home. And I think the biggest thing that helps with retention is making content in a way that it's like, okay, I need to listen to more of this. Like, they need to leave the episode, okay, I'm better off after listening to this podcast, and I like that feeling, and I want to come back. Obviously, you could talk about, like I said, more of the engagement stuff and pulling people back and trying to, do that sort of thing. But I think with the consistency in the content, whether it's social media posts, engagement in the community, or in the actual podcast content itself, I think as long as you're delivering value, like high level value, that people walk away feeling like I learned something tangible, they'll, intuitively want to come back and have that feeling again. So I'd say that's the number one thing.
Yeah, and I think money specifically as a topic, like you were saying earlier about how it's taboo to talk about, and it's like popular to not know about it. But as you sort of break that spectrum and start to lean more toward knowing about money, it's like your worldview changes, I think. So I think that could probably be a determining factor about whether or not someone's going to come back to your show, is that like their life gets better because they're starting to understand this topic that impacts them every single day. So next question for you, number 4, if you could start your show over again, what would you do differently to have grown more effectively?
I think I would probably do a few episodes and have them ready to go. I think, the caveat with that is, well, sometimes people do that and then they don't actually end up starting at all. So maybe it's better off to just put something out. But I think I wouldn't have confidence that I would have put everything out. I think I wish I sort of planned out the episodes a bit more and kind of had more of a direction of the next few episodes, because I kind of just like, blam, here we go. Okay, what's next? Blam. And then just like started putting episodes out. And then eventually that sort of came, and that's totally fine. But I think with podcasting, I think, even starting on social media before I even launched a podcast and just trying to build a following there so I could bring it in, because from what I know, like I said, the organic reach with podcasting is really tough. There's a lot of podcasts out there. You have to go on social media. So maybe having more of a long-term like content strategy before I launched, if I were to do it again, is probably what I would do. But like, hindsight's 2020, right? So I'm just glad I started and figured it along the way, and here we are.
Last question for the summit. And I don't know if you're doing any paid promotion yet, so this will be interesting to see how you answer it. But if we gave you $1,000 to promote your show and market your podcast, how would you spend the money?
That's a great question. So I recently started to have an audio engineer, which has been, for me, opening up my days like crazy so I can focus on, growth and getting more people to the show and being on social media, because really that's where a lot of the listeners come from, pretty much all of them. And that's been a lifesaver. So I'd probably take a good chunk of that and invest it over the next few little bit just with production, because I really think that that's going to matter over the long term, and help with that retention and things like that. And then the other half, I guess I would say would be marketing, and maybe dipping my toe in paid advertising and seeing what that world's like. Obviously doing more research on it, but everything that I've done so far has been completely organic. And it's so, I've heard from people that, pairing organic and paid is a lethal combination. So, I mean, I'd probably try to put a few bucks towards that. And I probably will in the future, if I'm being honest. So I'd say that's probably where it'd be, half production, half on marketing.
Yeah, and I like how you frame that as an investment over the next few months in the audio engineer. But, thank you very much for coming on and for thoughtfully answering our questions. I thought that your answers were interesting, and that I'm sure the New Money podcast will blow up in the future. I'm excited for you and excited to watch it. But
thank you so much.
If anybody listening is excited about it as I am and wants to check it out, where should we send our audience to find you, to find your podcast, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those are the two biggest platforms on, but really anywhere you listen to podcasts, you could just search up at the New Money Podcast. You'll find me there. Instagram, same handle, at the New Money Podcast. TikTok, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. It's just, I'm lucky enough to just have a consistent handle. Yeah, and shoot me a message if you listen to the show. Let me know if anything I said helped you. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this interview. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to our channel right here on YouTube. And if you feel like you learned something, share this episode on social media to help us grow our audience as well.